Welcome back, everyone. This is the second day of the CPR Dialogues 2020, and we're moving on to a session that examines the critical issue of public education in an era of increasing privatization. As you know, the session is titled Challenges in Public Education, Balancing State and Non-State Actors. And we have a star panel here who has seated themselves well before the audience comes in, which is commendable, and also probably tells us that they're really eager to address the issue at hand. So I'll introduce them briefly, though you have bios in your kit and you can read more about them. But we have with us today N.B. Verghese, a Chancellor at the National Institute of Education, Planning and Administration, Rashmi Sharma, who is a Senior Visiting Vice Chancellor. That's an error in my program. Yeah. So he's the Vice Chancellor of the National Institute of Education, Planning and Administration. Rashmi Sharma, who's Senior Visiting Fellow at ACREER and a former IAS officer. Priyadarshini Joshi of the Global Education Monitoring Team at UNESCO. Parth J. Shah, Founder President of Center for Civil Society. And the panel is being moderated by CPR Senior Fellow Kiran Bhatti. I'll hand over to you.
And welcome to this session. I'm not going to take a lot of time saying my initial remarks and hand over to the panel, just to say that the public education has been in public eye in a very critical sense the last several years, and the non-state actors have therefore acquired an increasing space within the education domain. And while, of course, there is a role for them to play in the provision of education, I think it has also raised a lot of important questions regarding what it means for the provision by the state, what it means for the relationship between the state and the non-state. I think the questions that are only beginning to sort of raise their heads, and it is an opportune time for us to have a larger conversation about these questions. I will be moderating a discussion after I've asked the panelists to speak a few words first, and then we will take some questions from the audience as well. So I'm going to start by asking Rashmi Sharma, because she's been part of the state, what she believes has been sort of change that is taking place in the public education space from the perspective of the state. How differently does the state see its own role changing with the influx of many more non-state partners.
Okay, thank you, Kiran. So, having worked in government for many years, uh, and also sort of trying to look at government from the outside, when you talk about non-government actors, I think it's very important to keep in mind the nature of the government. So basically, today we are in a context of, and have been, of an education system or schools which most people would perceive as unsatisfactory. Our learning levels, our teaching learning practices, and so on. Most people would say that this is not adequate. So this is the kind of background in which we are talking about non-state factors. Now, there are two or three dynamics I think spinning around. One is that because government schools are not satisfactory, there is a greater sort of reliance on private schools among them. And this reliance too is shaped by the quality of government schools. Now, if you have high quality of government schools, the reliance on private schools would be to the extent that the private schools are really good. Okay? So you have a high quality public school, but you get a much better private school, you go there. But if you have low quality public school, then you will access private schools of almost any kind, whether run by NGOs or whether run for a profit. So we see, and we see this, we see that people are willing to send their children to the so-called Indian private schools, which basically gives you a tie, because, I mean, it's really not an educational, serious educational establishment, because of the nature of government schools. So this is how government schools impact the whole NGO sector or the private sector by admitting all kinds of actors. The second thing that I'd like to point out, and this is sort of something that there's some recent work that I'm doing, in that it's coming out very clearly, that you may say that because the quality of government schools is poor and the supporting government institutions are not really able to create the kind of context in which you can have really high quality schools. There should be greater collaboration with other educational entities like the NGO sector and other organizations which are able to provide resource support. Now, since the mid-90s, I have been part of some of these areas. But as I have seen the whole scenario change, if the quality of government institutions, and by that I mean government institutions at the apex level, the Commissioner's Office, Commissioner Education Office, SCR, is itself poor, their capacity to screen private actors and to partner with them is also very, very good. So we are recently doing a study in 2 states, and you find that one, state actors are partnering with non-government actors and they are partnering with resource agencies, but one, they don't seem to be able to select the right area to partner. So your weakness may be that children really don't learn to read in the primary sector, but you start partnering over some achievement testing or some sort of computer related. So your own ability to really identify what you need also demands a certain amount of state capacity. What is happening in this kind of scenario is many organizations, private and NGO, which are not really interested in education, which are not really educational organizations, are stepping in. And they in turn are bringing in also a lot of dubious educational skills. So this kind of weakness of the state capacity is also encouraging at the resource agency level a similar sort of a play of many actors who are not really educated, which is further distorting the whole system. The third point that I'd like to make in this part is that if you have a lot of NGO players and you have a lot of private players and you have many kinds of players, and we have some very, very low standard players because the bar that we offer through state schools is low. Your capacity to regulate is also very low. So, for instance, studies that are done in Andhra Pradesh, the school system is pretty much taken over by something called corporate schools, okay, which are basically coaching classes for IIT, and they start coaching students as young as 6th grade for the IIT. And if any educationist went into one of these corporate schools, they would have a high blood pressure and various kinds of other physical ailments, I'm sure. Now, the capacity of the state government to regulate this kind of effort, and anyone can make it, is also very poor, because A, the own adherence, the own understanding of the education process is incomplete, and second, because of the rent seeking, the political power of these actors, and the fact that they are able to kind of, at the highest levels form accords and so on, means that the state can do nothing. Now, if you look at what happens to kids who go here, something like the kids start going to such establishments here, many of them from class 1. Now, only 2 to 3% of the kids who go to such establishments actually make it to the IIT. For the remaining, some may make it to other institutions. But for the remaining, they've lost a chance to develop talents which they may have in social science, in language, in art and music. So not only have they lost their childhood in these establishments, they have also lost career opportunities. And this is a nightmare. Yet we are not able to regulate it for the reasons that I mentioned above. The short point that I want to make here is that we cannot look at the role of NGOs or private actors independent of the state. And the surprising thing is that while many people would see the state and the non-state actors as competing, actually there is a sort of synchrony. If the state system is good, you will get better actors, and you will be able to weed out actors that are not so good. And if the state system is poor, as today, you will have the play of all kinds of people, all kinds of agencies, which may or may not be seriously interested in education. And as from the mid-1990s, when I started working in the education sector, this is something that I have observed, that in the mid-1990s, there was an NGO body and a kind of community of NGOs which were genuinely education oriented, and we started collaborating with them after birthdays. Good to remember that period. But as time grew, there were two sort of things we could say. These were really good NGOs. Though they worked a lot with state governments, with the national governments, the capacities of the state government actors and national government actors did not change significantly because of the disorganization within the state. Within the state, I can also explain the dynamics later. And secondly, one has seen the entry of various organizations not particularly interested in education having a very big voice around education.
Thank you very much. You raised many different very important points. But I think the big point that you're making actually is that at the end of the day, it is the state that sort of sets the benchmark for what how the education should be, or what the quality of education can be. And but the state capacity, you're saying, over time has been getting eroded, and that has led to the introduction of all the different kinds of non-state actors, not all of them themselves with the adequate amount of capacity to provide education in the sense and the quality that one would expect from these institutions. So I'm going to turn to Professor Bharti now, since you've been associated also with education institutions at different levels and through the training programs, etc., that are conducted at NIFA. You also meet some of the state officials down the line, not just those who are in the apex. And so you have a sense also of what's been happening to the state capacity and how that has had an impact on the quality of public schooling. And do you feel that the nature of public education has been changing, and do you see that it is just a capacity problem, or is it also that the influence of the presence of so many different kinds of actors is having an impact on how the state itself perceives its role in delivery, especially at the front end?
Thank you very much. An institute is called National Institute of Education, and we play an active role in helping the learning and also the distributing bodies in preparing plans and also policies. So let me speak from that point of view. Firstly, a direct answer to the question that you posed. I do not think that it is lack of capacities. That's the main reason why public institutions are performing. Because if you look at the teacher profile of the schools, you find that the teacher profile is per aspect. All are educated, all are trained, they undergo a written test and a competition to get into the system. So I cannot say that the competencies or capacities are limited. Let me start by saying that I want to elaborate on one idea. That is, how schools should become an extension of the democratic principles. And when I say democratic principles, democracy has one quality which many other ideologies do not have. Because its tolerance limit to inequality is rather important. Therefore, how schools become institutions which promotes equality and reduces inequality, and how it leads us to move towards an equal society. Because if you look into history, what one finds is that the public institutions and the public sector led institutions and public sector led development, both economic, social and educational development was the norm that was taken for granted for two reasons. The pre-construction stage in Europe and the post-liberation period in the most of the developing countries. What we find is that it's the public sector that led. So public sector led growth was the model that was accepted. Secondly, knowledge was considered as a public good, and therefore there was no reservation in investing public resources for knowledge. However, knowledge producing institutions were not considered as public goods, and therefore there are differences that emerged when we are talking about schools or we are talking about the universities. Now, what has happened is a change that has taken place is that knowledge remains a public good, but universities and institutions have become public institutions and public goods without public support. And that is the transition that has taken place, and that is the change that has taken place. Let me elaborate on this very issue. What one finds is that when income levels of people go up, what normally one finds is that one looks for quality. Poor people look for quantity, and middle class and upper middle class look for quality. This is a general principle of our behavior, social behavior. Those who are done economics, undergraduate level may understand, but what I am trying to elaborate on. Now, if you see that, there is a good called defense paradox of defense good evil. So I am talking about that, extending that to the education sector. What it means is that when income levels of people are going up, what happens is that those which are in poor quality are not being affected. And this is what is happening in education. We are moving towards almost majority or more than 50% of people who are middle class, especially globally. And this middle class has a tendency to move towards market rather than to the government. And that has created a sense of choice, which is very different from the sense of choice. So it is not a question of whether the public institutions behave well, whether the public institutions are performed well. There is another force. This is no way supporting that public institutions are performing well. What I mean to say that there is another force that is very dominant. So for example, the public sector-led growth was not questioned till 1980s when structural adjustment programs became very dominant feature and world bank became the dominant feature in the decision making process of many of the developing countries. You find that the public sector was criticized, its investment policies were criticized, and the investment in the social sectors was considered to be unproductive, and that also paved the way for the market processes and marketization processes in education at all levels, including school and higher education. This tablet or this ideology or this point of policy change was very widely spread, especially in the developing countries. For example, in the developed countries, most of the universities and higher education enrollment is still in the public institutions. In the less developed market economies, you find that they are relying increasingly on the market system to promote massification. So there is a change that you find that the developed countries and mature market economies rely more on the public institutions to promote massification, whereas the less developed economies and less developed market economies rely more on the market to massify higher education. And in the school education, the trend is like different. In the school education, what is happening is that in the 1950s, if all the schools and all the colleges were mostly government and enrollments were either in the government schools or the private aided schools. But today what we find is that the trend is changing. And if you see that there is a positive association between levels of education and the involvement of the private. So for example, in the school sector, 20% of the schools are in the private and aided sector. But this is only 11% at the primary sector, primary school level, whereas it is 62% at the higher secondary level. If you take the higher education sector, you find the same trend there. More than 78% of the higher education institutions are in the private sector, and more than 64% of the enrollments are also in the private sector. So this trend, this change from 1950s to now, or 60s to now, in the last 50 years is a dramatic change that we find in the relative role between the public and private sector. Now when we talk about extension to democracy, it also means that public policy and the state actions have helped in bringing children to the schools and to the universities. But we have done a gross injustice to those people who need not to the schools. What is happening is that the distance today or the differences today, the variations today are not between those who are inside the schools and outside the schools. The variations are between those who are inside the schools, those who gain. The gains in learning are varying substantially than the changes or the differences or the variations in coming to the schools or colleges. While the gains in learning are varying so substantially, that explains the generation of intergenerational inequalities over a period of time. It is not primary school, whether you are primary school educated or you are secondary school educated, what type of education that you got, from which school that you got educated, and what is the nature of your socialization process, not only the cognitive development part that has taken place, but also the socialization process that has taken place in the schools. That decides your next step, either admission to the colleges, nor our admission to the schools and many other places. The two factors play when we go to the schools and other places. In many places, they ask for only two things: CBSE syllabus and English medium, English as a medium instruction. These are the two things which many state governments do not provide. So what I feel is that sometimes our policy succeeded in marketing and selling something which the people do not want. This may be a slightly strong statement, but if you look at empirically, this is what is happening. So two trends that happen. One is that there is a decline in enrollment. If you look at the primary education sector, between 2013 and 2017-18, what one finds is that there is a decline of 9.6 million children at the primary level and 2.9 million children at the upper primary level. The only expansion sector that takes place is the secondary and higher senior secondary and the higher education sector. That is where the expansion takes place. So there is a decline in the enrollment. Is it because of the demographic factors alone? No. Part of it is because of the demographic decline, because if you find states like Kerala and many other places where there is a demographic decline, we can say that the class size is declining, but that is not the case when you talk about, there is another trend that you find is that there is a flow of students from government schools to the private schools and private unaided schools. But let me say that when I say private unaided schools, it is not only the high-end schools of English medium schools of very few charging, what is called as budget private schools. There are 4 lakhs budget private schools and 60 million children are enrolled. So it is not only this. So the change that I find today is that this change, this shift that is taking place from the government schools, from the government institutions to the private institutions at the school level. Whereas this trend is not the same that you find in the higher education level. Even today, to get into an IIT, to get into an IIM, to get into the prestigious institutions in the public sector is the one that was referred to by Dr. Rashmi when she was referring to the coaching classes and other things. People are ready to invest more. But the investment paradigm in India is that if you want to get into that type of institution, you should first invest heavily when the child is at the pre-primary level. Previously, this was not the case. Admissions were based on the scores at the +2 level. Now this has changed. So if you want to reap the benefits and to contribute to the intergenerational inequalities, and where you are a beneficiary of 1% or 5% of the top income level, you have to invest not when the child is 12 years or 15 years old, you have to invest when the child is 3 years old. And that is the change that is taking place, and that is how the gains in learning are very unequally distributed, and that leads to an unequal distribution of income in the future, and perhaps democracy defined in terms of economic and social inequality is that it will remain a dream rather than a reality. We continue with this type of educational progress that we are experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rose. So that was a very insightful look at both from the primary to the higher secondary level. I think the point that you're really making is an interesting one because what you're saying is that actually the aspirations of the people are changing and people are choosing very differently now, and that is actually in a sense defining what quality in a school means. So at the end of the day, they want to get to the higher institution and they want the degree and they want the marks and they want the job, and that's sort of working backwards and influencing what is the kind of education that's being provided, and it is moving away, I think what you're saying, from the larger goals maybe of education, which is schooling particularly being a social leveler, the democratic values, etc., etc. It's also to focus in a very unilateral way on getting certain kinds of marks and moving forward, and sort of the whole outcome and learning outcome focus that we are seeing in the public domain. And that is also in some way linked to the private sector defines itself as a kind of paradigm that has brought onto the whole education space. So I'll turn to Parth now, who's an advocate of school choice and parental aspirations of different kinds of schools. And Parth, what do you have to say about how the private, in a sense, is becoming a measure of the public, and what does that mean for the larger field of education?
So my role is very clear what I'm supposed to do on this panel is to defend the private sector, the non-state sector. Let me start with sort of minor quibble about my philosophical protest about the title itself. Right? So I saw the title state and non-state actors. So one thing that immediately occurred to me is that we are all defined in relation to the state. Right? So I remember a old debate we had when the NGO sort of word became very common. So why are we defining ourselves as a non-governmental organization? Right? So again, the similar debate actually here in terms of why are we defining the debate between multiple providers of education services as state and non-state, as opposed to using any other appropriate phrases that would be positive and not just in opposition to the state. Right? But that's sort of philosophical protest in that sense, just like the idea that we define ourselves in a more positive way. Let me start, I think, why we are working with the private sector. And what has been the motivation for CCS, for example, to engage in this particular space. So if you remember, it became very clear in the mid-90s that now the poor have been slowly also using low-fee private schools particularly for their children's education. Until that point, it was largely the state schools that everybody went to, including a bit across the state schools. And at that point we realized that now if you want to work with the poor parents, you don't have to work only with the government schools. You now work with these low-fee private schools, which we at CCS sort of labeled these as a budget private school, BPS, the term that we are using. And the reason for choosing that was 3 or 4. Now, to sort of give you that rationale behind it, you will understand it is not so much the opposition to the state that has moved us to work with the private schools, right? It is understanding of what they can do and what others are doing in this particular space. So one thing became clear that you can work with the poor even in private schools. You don't have to be in the government school. Secondly, we realized at the time that most of the NGOs, including some of the biggest ones that work in education space, work only with government schools. And there was nobody actually looking at this low-fee private school segment, which was serving the same population of the poor parents. And we thought maybe we would have some advantage in choosing a different domain of engagement than where most of the other civil society actors are. Right? And the third reason was in terms of diffusion of best practices. So we saw that if you are able to show the particular intervention is going to work well and is going to produce better results, right, in terms of learning and other things, then the private school would copy each other. And there is a market sort of pressure on the private schools to adapt best practices, right? And then that would, the idea would diffuse quite rapidly within the system without us having to push school by school, right? Unlike in a sense what we are doing in the state sector. And interestingly, the fourth reason, and this is just came to us as we are thinking more deeply and engaging in the space, that even though it would diffuse, the idea would diffuse quite automatically because of the market pressure of competition. There is also a limit to how far the diffusion would happen. There is natural dynamic in a sense which would stop the diffusion from going to every school, and thereby one idea becoming sort of one size fits for all. Right? So idea may be good, it will be copied by a certain number of schools in certain spaces, but it would not go to all schools, and therefore we would not have the fear of creating sort of one single factory style schooling system that we all worry about. Right? That was another reason for us to engage with the private schools. The way we began to engage and then became much more prominent after the Right to Education Act became the law. Right? It was so clear to us that given the focus of the RTE on input norms and infrastructure requirements, most of these budget private schools are not going to be able to meet those requirements. Right? And therefore, either they are going to be informal, unrecognized by the government, because they will not get recognition from the state, right? Or they would have to play the traditional Indian jugaad of managing the system to stay relevant or recognized in the, after the RTE. And so we thought one thing we need to do is to bring this BPS sector together in one single national platform and give them a voice. There was no voice for this sector at all in that point in time. And RTE, in a sense, made it quite immediate necessity that is to create this voice to make sure the people, the public, the media, and the policymakers are exposed to what the sector is, what the sector does, and what is the scale of the sector. And so we created this alliance of state associations of low-fee private schools, which is called NISA, the National Independent Schools Alliance, that works with associations at the local level, which are of a few hundred schools, sometimes 30, 40 schools in a given area, which represent this particular segment of the population. So NISA does two things. One is a regulatory sort of advocacy, working with the government and other organizations to sort of advocate why these schools are necessary to exist and what government can do in terms of regulatory adjustments or really looking at the primary motivation behind regulation, right? And therefore focus more and more in terms of looking at learning outcomes and not so much as infrastructure and input requirements. Right? So changing in a sense the focus of the RTE to some extent to look at what really matters, which is how much students are learning in the school and not so much how are they learning. Right? There was one big chunk of the work that ISA has been doing. They also have been in the court fighting cases with the school closure announced by the various state governments. And second, I think, and more importantly, they also work on and some of the challenges that you highlighted, right? Some of the sort of bad apples in the sector. And any sector has bad apples. There is government, politics, whatever sector that you consider. And there are good people and there are not so good people in every sector. And then ISA thought that maybe one thing we could do as an organization is to figure out what kind of incentives we can provide to schools to do better by their students and their parents. So think about ways in which we could have self-regulation that allows the parents to engage much more productively with the school. And there are many things which have been done in that space. If I can also elaborate that later on. I think one thing I want to highlight before we want to debate of the policy part of the debate. Why are parents sending their kids to private schools? I think one thing we all have to understand, it's a huge cost to the parents. Today, I think in most government schools, of course there are no fees to be paid. Most government schools give you free textbooks, free uniform, of course there's free midday meal. Right? In many government schools, including Delhi schools, you actually get some cash incentive for being in the school. So a parent who makes a choice to go to a private school is sacrificing all of those benefits that they have received by going to a government school. So not only the opportunity cost is so high, of course there is a direct cost of going to a private school, which is the fees they would have to pay, transport costs and textbooks, other things, uniform they would have to buy, and many other things the school requires them to do, in addition to some basic things that they would consider. And so that choice has to be very difficult choice. Very difficult choice. So I'm using choice for a parent to forego, particularly for a poor parent, to forego what's available for free, and then on the top of that pay for the education that they could otherwise gotten. And as we began working in the sector, I realized that it's even far more difficult choice that parents are making. You have 3 or 4 kids. You are not going to be able to afford to send all 3 or 4 of them to private schools, right? So in the beginning, in the 90s, when we began to look at this, selection was made by gender. So basically the boys went to private schools and girls generally went to the government schools, right? But now you see that is no longer the case, right? But even then, parents are making a judgment about who is smarter among their 3 or 4 kids, and who is going to go to private school, and who is going to go to government school. And you can see how heart-wrenching the choice has to be for a parent to choose one among the 4, or whatever parameters they are using to make that choice, right? To send to a private school while other 3 are going to go to government school. And I think we need to understand where the parents are coming from, why are they making these choices, and that will allow us to understand better in terms of what we can do to fulfill the aspirations they have, right? Not something that the experts and people like us decide was good for them. And that I see as a sort of big, major challenge in the sector. There are sort of notions of what's a good education that people who work in the domain have, and they feel that that is the kind of education that everybody should accept and be happy with. We know that is not really the case, and this is one part of the challenge that we played out, right? Just last point I make, what is making this choice for parents? One, of course, is English medium, and many studies have been done that show the first point people point out is English medium education, which we know is not really so English medium. But it matters, it helps them even to speak broken English. Right? What is more important is that this is where I found the comparison between government schools and private schools also quite lacking. To talk to parents a little more in detail, not just as a questionnaire engagement, to find that they are looking at so many different things. So one parent told us that the reason why she has chosen private school for the daughter is that she has to get ready in the morning, which is the mother would be compelled to dress her well, comb her hair, right? She said what is important is that somebody checks her nails, her hair, right? And that's the kind of skill, discipline that she wants to instill, right? And this is something the school, private school does, which probably would not happen in the government school. And I was quite stunned when I first heard that. Right? we don't really think of school performing that role. But that is the role that many of these parents see school performing, right? So discipline was one. Many pointed out that school door would close by 9:15, and if you are not there by that time, you lose the day, right? And that was enough pressure and discipline to be on time. And many parents, the poor parents, thought that's a good thing to inculcate in their children. Right? So I think once you engage with them, the deeper level, you find there are many reasons. They see the difference between what private schools do and what government schools do, which are not all captured by learning outcomes, which is how we compare this two set of schools, right? And that's an important thing to understand, particularly I think for the report that we're going to be creating, is asking those questions about why these choices are being made and how do we understand those choices better.
Thank you, thanks, Mark. I think it is important to get this perspective, and which is why we wanted to have part of the fact. Just to very quickly clarify that the state and non-state we don't see necessarily in opposition to each other, but as Rashmi ji said, the state does set the benchmark. Education is still, I think, in a democratic society, seen as part of the social contract between the state and citizens. And so, in that sense, a kind of primary
Defining it, not opposition.
yeah, right.
Defining the
Yeah.
other sector and
Because
other
that's right. So because it is seen primarily as the state's responsibility, what is the responsibility of the non-state is slightly different, because the non-state is not constitutionally mandated or obligated to provide in the same manner as the state is. And that is the only difference actually that's there between the state and non-state. But the fact that the levels of accountability are different for the two, I think has ramifications on how the state and the non-state delivers. And that's actually part of the questioning or the discussion that we want to have. How does that affect the functioning of each of these sectors? How does it also affect the interaction of one sector with the other? So, because now we also have some public-private partnerships where both are in tandem and are supposed to work together. What is that doing to the way this, and more importantly, we want to understand actually how the presence of non-state, non-government, private, whatever words you want to do, how is that affecting the way the government itself is delivering? How is it affecting how it looks at itself? Does it see it is no longer the sole provider, but it is the sole provider. It has a whole other perception even of itself and what it can or cannot or does or does not do. But when there is so-called competition from other sectors, then how does that impact the functioning of the state? I think those are questions we are still grappling with. And as you rightly said, parents are making a choice because they have a variety of options available to them. But I think the question, the sort of the elephant in the room, and I'm going to ask Rashmi to address that is, and it's something that Professor Gurpreet alluded to, is that the goals are slightly different. Okay, the private sector and the public, there are certain obligations that the state has in its delivery of education, which is not limited to the learning outcomes. It's not limited to addressing specifically the parental aspirations only. It has to, its goal in delivering education is much wider. It is creating citizens, it is fostering equality, it is speaking social leveler, for instance. And the private sector is not obliged to provide any of those goals, actually. It can simply address, we're not being held accountable the way the state can be held accountable to those goals. For the private sector, if it meets its bottom line or it meets particular requirements or demands of the parents, is what it drives it. So, for instance, if now we're beginning to hear the IIT schools, which are denominational schools, where the ideology being taught may not actually be an ideology that is in conflict with the constitutional values. But in the private space, it is allowed to do that in a sense. What is the accountability for that within the private space? But in the government, it is not possible to have those sorts of things. So there are lots of questions that are coming. Sorry?
We'll debate about textbook and with every government change.
That's right, but the government can, the debate exists because you can ask those questions of the government. What is happening in the private, who is going to answer those questions? That's where I think the state and non-state difference starts to play out. But Priyadashini, I want you to speak a little bit more about, in particular, the issue, because one of the big criticisms, as part of quite aware, is the issue of equality or equity in the non-government school systems, the private schools, and how do you address that?
First of all, thank you CPR, thank you Kiran, it's been a fantastic conference and already an enlightening debate. I think the answer we all know is something that none of us have it's not a I'll try to get at that a bit later. First, I just wanted to ask you, because I come from a different perspective, how many of you, from a show of hands, know about the SDGs? Yeah. And how many of you know of my report, the Global Education Monitoring Report? Okay, so basically, I just wanted to give you a framing of what we do. We write the Global Report on Education. We've been writing it since 2002. It's sort of a global report that's been used to hold governments and donors, quote unquote, accountable to their commitments in the EFA era. And since 2016, it's being used to hold governments accountable and all of the other stakeholders accountable for their commitments in the SDG era. I mean, there's a lot to talk about what we do, but I think I would just say that our approach has been very much to be measured, to be evidence-driven, to be data-driven, and to sort of almost always broaden the conversation on every topic we look at. For instance, the first report on the 2016 report was on education for people and planet, on their sustainable development goals. So we defined education quite broadly as formal, informal, non-formal learning. It was about viewing education not just as a social sector, but also about human capital for productivity, for education for behavior change, for social protection, the whole gamut. So, and during that time, that I'm sure many of you have been in all of these transition times between these big global agendas. During that time, there was again a bit of an energy on let's talk about interlinkages, let's talk about education and society, let's talk about education and health and what have you. So that is also our role, education and the SDGs. How do we think about that? How do we try to change the conversation? On that, broadly speaking, I would just simply say it's been very, very hard to do this because I think we all exist in our silos. The idea of multisectorality, some people do it, some people don't. I don't think that there's been a big advance because of the SDG agenda. Our next report was on accountability in education, which is somewhat linked to our role as an accountability mechanism. But also a lot of this conversation is about accountability, who is to hold, who accountable. And I would say that, again, it's almost like a grand, report, thesis of 30 people, a grand PhD. I can say that in a room of researchers. But it's, I feel like we just try to get at it from a different perspective. So instead of focusing on the teacher absenteeism as, teachers are failing, we've talked about education as a shared responsibility. It's whether there's an enabling environment that exists to help teachers function in their system, what are the structural factors. Of course, we will discuss the literature that talks about teachers are failing, but it's about that comprehensive picture of what's happening. And then we talked about migration, where we talked actually about, even though a lot of the discussion was focused on the migrant crisis in Europe, we made sure that it was expanded to talk about all of the migrations of our world, including internal migration in India for seasonal workers, and what that means for education of children. And this year, the report that we launched in April is on inclusion. So that was the 2020 report. And it's been quite a tough nut to crack because inclusion is such a broad topic. But there are real conceptual differences between people who think about disability, as a target group, or gender as a target group, versus people who think that an inclusive approach is about system change at a very fundamental level with very limited sort of efforts at a target group level. So now we come to the non-state discussion and the reason I'm here. That report is the report for 2021. We're at the early phase of that report, which means that we've developed a concept note. We've commissioned a think piece by a leading expert in the field. We've done a little bit of a literature review. We've sort of outlined how we're going to look at the issue. And it's interesting to be in these conversations because I have been, in my limited career, I've been part of some of these pro versus con debates, and you just feel like you can almost, hear the beats coming because this is a very specific India context thing, but the pro versus con of the private sector debate just does not seem to end. And that is why, our report is also titled Non-State Actors in Education. But as, the panelists here have said, it's about the non-state as defined in relation to the state. It is also about, because I guess we're still in our, research ivory tower, it's about defining what that is. Because what is state, what is non-state is very different by country. It's you are from an India perspective, like when I look at it, at the world, it is just extremely different. What, a faith-based school can be private in some countries, it can be publicly provided in some other. So at this global level, it becomes this complicated, terminology exercise and also definitional exercise. So we'll be engaging in all of that, the breadth of what is understood as public and private, hopefully to add some fresh information into the pile, because as you researchers know, almost no one is going to go away from this room with a changed view. It's sort of like we're tinkering at the margins a little bit, but our role often is to make sure that it's all there in one place, and we've done our thinking. We've put our heft behind how we're going to think about an issue and present it to you. For instance, we're going to be talking about providers of education, but we'll talk about not just the public versus the private for-profit provider, but also, of course, all of the non-profit providers. We're going to talk about faith-based schools. In our conversation on provision, we'll also be talking about private tutoring, which has become a huge thing. A lot of the thinking of that comes from East Asia, but we know that it's very prevalent in South Asia. We know that and it's interesting, these debates are very different at different levels of education, but also in the private tutoring world, it's a very, very different conversation from what I know of East Asia compared to and similarly, in higher education it's still quite intense, but in early childhood it seems to be a very different debate. In adult education, the debate is quite limited because I think adult education has just lost a lot of, global policy, heft. So a lot of our concentrated energy, at least in my world, is around the basic education space, and people talking about the Liberia, some of the big projects, or India RTE, or the Liberia, Liberia Partnership Scheme, or the Uganda Partnership Scheme, or the Chile voucher experiment, or the US models of charter and vouchers. So what ends up happening, I think, is that the danger of a report, even as we try to be global, is that the evidence base, who's talking about what, gets really shrunk into some countries, some institutions, and some very specific ideas. And the danger in the research in this field is also that, let's say one side produces a report, arguing for learning outcomes of X and Y. Another side will come out with an argument saying, X and Y, which means that at the end of the day, as research, curators or aggregators, you end up always with a mixed evidence base. So clearing the clutter is a real challenge in this field. So that is my assessment, not just for having written this, writing this report, but also it's also my field of study. I studied the public-private sort of engagement in the public-private issue in Nepal. So it also comes from that. I would also just say, there's a lot to say, but just 2 points on the equity issue is at the heart of our analysis always. We've done it through, we've been sort of the early providers of wide-scale analysis on household survey, analysis by inequality. It's called the World Inequality Database on Education, WIDE, that's what we call it. So and people have really used it, at least at that global level, to talk more about these inequalities that exist in education and in other areas. It is also something that drives us and our thinking for the next report, right? The inequality implications, the risks to the system. And I think it is very important. I think the panelists here are probably in agreement that learning outcomes is not the only way to think about this, because the evidence base is super mixed. Once you start controlling for socioeconomic factors, the learning outcome advantage of private schools in many contexts is not very significant. So you can really get trapped in that learning outcomes debate. But a lot of other things have to be discussed also in terms of what is being provided. And it will always be also with this, the reason we're talking about non-state actors is that there's finally an acknowledgement at a UN level with an agency that wants primarily to with an object perspective that they exist, non-state actors exist. So we have to talk about it. We do the descriptive work, we'll do it as well as we can. We'll do the analytical work, think about the evidence. And then we'll do the critical work, which is our stand on it, which means that it will sort of define how we commission the work and also how we decide to distill what we do with it. So I think you're right that I think what Kiran was saying about the private versus public and the sort of the guarantor of education thing. the government is the guarantor for the right to education. It's just that in our role, we have to think about what else exists and how we talk about it in terms of both the regulatory, like what can be done better in terms of regulation, and also, if there is innovation, how do we sort of talk about the innovation of ideas? Because some people will come and argue that it's not just the private sector that brings innovations. The public can also be innovating, and in some countries they do, right? But the public sector also innovates. So there's a lot of debate, and I think our job is to clear the clutter, and I'm here almost to hear, India experts tell me more about this. And just a final plug before, move to the bigger debate is, we'll have a regional report on South Asia, linked to the non-state actors report, where we're calling for proposals of partner institutions for the next 2 months. But if individual researchers want to, engage with me, please let me know at the end of this time.
Putting that perspective that yes, of course, non-state actors are here to stay, and there is a positive role, obviously, that they also play. They bring a lot to the table. I think the conversation really has to be on how best to engage with them, how best to work, how they can contribute the most to the larger agenda of education. And that is why actually the social information stage around what that is, what those mechanisms can be, and it relates to questions that you raised that I think we need to take the conversation further to talking more about regulation rather than having very polarized views on the private and the state in that sense. And so I'll come back to you, Shalini, because you mentioned regulation earlier, again in the context of capacity. And it's true that actually we don't have a proper regulatory mechanism for education, just sort of institutionally almost doesn't exist. There is some monitoring that is supposed to be done by the state, but other than that, to really regulate quality, regulate the functioning of learning, so we certainly don't have an independent regulatory mechanism that will do that. And I think the experience around the world is that regulation needs to be as independent from the implementing function in order for it to be effective. And so do you think that now actually in this conversation of state and non-state, the role of the state in terms of its regulatory function needs to sort of step out a bit as its implementing function in some places getting shared by the non-state actors as well?
Yeah, definitely, I think that's a very valid point. And we don't have the regulatory structure. To be very frank, the private school is what it has. So is the public.
Doesn't.
Yeah, but that's also wrong. At least the public school is supposed to follow state curriculum, use certain textbooks. At least they're supposed to. A private school can orient itself totally to coaching on IIT from grade 6 on. A public school is not mandated to do that, even if it does that. Plus, so definitely we need a regulatory structure, but as I want to make the same point again, that if you look at at the very grassroots where the actual regulation is done at the district level, the district education. Now these guys, a lot of people I know it's not fashionable to sort of think that government might be understaffed, but if you go to the grassroots, and plus, as I say again, if you want to regulate, we don't have enough people in government, especially at the grassroots level. I'm not talking about national. They are not the ones who are going to go and sort of regulate. In the state government, at the district level, we don't have people with an adequate understanding of education, and I really don't know what they do. Okay? So that is really a big problem. And the third problem, of course, you all know is rent seeking. In our context, regulation and rent seeking become intertwined very fast. And since we don't know enough about rent seeking, our capacity to regulate is really, really very limited. So, the kind of regulation that one would want, which is to steer schools, private schools, towards a good education, I'm afraid we ourselves, and I'm not in government anymore, but the government itself is not yet ready to do. It is not structured to do. It doesn't have the wherewithal to do in terms of human resources, in terms of understanding, and even in terms of intake. So you have a huge problem. I don't have any rigid solution. Of course, I can suggest some that you upgrade the knowledge levels, you upgrade the human resources, to then seeking we don't have. That is a big regulation becoming the rent seeking.
The higher education develop regulatory mechanisms. They also have
Take higher education or school education, there are regulations. Some people say that we are over-regulated, others say that there is no regulation. You know, that basically the issue is that if you want to do anything, you have scope to do it without doing certain measures. I think the inefficiency of the public system is the best opportunity to pursue institutional goals. And the inefficiency of the public system gives the best scope for pursue an institutional goal if you have a visionary leader. I find that the questions related to not only that we talk about at the higher education level, or even school edition that we talk about in school, there is immense scope to reorganize and rearrange school activities or university activities. Nothing stops. Only thing is that we say that we do not have money, so we cannot proceed further. But many of the activities to improve at the school level and at the college level, many of these activities may not require substantial additional investment. We are not in a position to plan for it. The system is not organized. The biggest problem with the schools and universities and the colleges is that the activities in the school are not organized. I think that is the basic difference between the government school and the private school. If you see in terms of the learning time that is taking place for a government, a student who is studying in a government school and a student studying in a private school, you find that the major source of variation between the government schools and private schools is on that. And there is a notion of time elasticity of learning. And you find that the students who spend more time in learning activities score higher than the students who spend less time. And in the government schools, when I say that it is not organized, it means that may not be starting on time. And if you ask a teacher, we conducted a field survey, and in that we asked a question: how do you organize your time from 10:30 to 4:30 in the schools? And I can show you that out of the 4,000 questionnaires that came back, the maximum cut once, cut second time, third time, etc. Because we said that the total time should not exceed the officially prescribed time. And so you feel that how much time you spend on attendance, how much time you spend on preparation, how much time you spend. So ultimately that gives me the feeling that this is one thing that I can firmly say is that our school activities are not organized. When it is not organized, the student loses in terms of learning time. Why I am making this point is that it does not require any additional regulations or any addition. Second, a second major change that is taking place both in higher education and school education is that the fastest growing segment in enrollment in higher education, especially, is the disadvantaged youths and first generation learners. And when education is expanding to the remote rural areas, it is this group of people who are coming. The uniform pattern of distribution of the teachers' attention to all the students, the way traditionally we are organizing the classes, perhaps it's not serve the purpose. That is all right for a more homogeneous group coming in the middle classes and upper middle classes. But when you go to these dimensions, you find that we need a different strategy of organizing classrooms. And we have years for 28,000 schools in India have less than 30 students. So if the teachers want to organize in small groups, it is much easier. So we are not talking about a huge system with 1,000 students or 1,500 students in the schools. That is the case. So I would say that regulation, what do you mean, what do you want regulation? There are many things that can be done with the regulation or without the regulation. And the public system is so weak that even if you are doing something which you should not do, there are possibilities, unless there is a complaint or RTA, There is no way of looking back to that thing. So there is scope for moving forward within the constraints and getting, and what you call as a catch-up. The government schools need to catch up with the higher levels of learning that is produced by the private schools. And I'm not saying that the government schools should become private schools, that is not the way that I'm trying to see. Because as I mentioned, is that when you are seeing institution as a unit in the extension of the democratic principles, I find government schools with its inefficiencies, they are much better performing than that of the private schools. So I see that regulations are necessary for two things. We have gone to a market-friendly focus. But the markets are not become people-friendly. Regulations are required to make markets people-friendly, not constraining the schools and its functions. And how do we make markets people-friendly? That is our, and the answer is that we have to produce socially responsible private sector. And that is the place for regulations are.
Thank you. So I think it is important clarification in terms of what we understand by regulation and whether it is seen as something that is a constraint or whether it is actually seen as something that facilitates improvement in quality, and that we could work, I think, for both. That's why I think it needs to be applied both to the public and the private sector, to make the private sector maybe more socially accountable and to make the public sector also more accountable in terms of, say, organizing learning, capacities, etc. And I think that has been the experience of those who have looked at the public sector carefully, is that it does sort of suffer in terms of capacity, I think, to bring in that higher level of organization, to bring in that higher level of, dealing with some of these complex problems that it does face, because it probably deals with classrooms with, varying diverse set of students, with backgrounds, etc. So, I think capacity constraints, I know, again, I think it's different to me between the competence of, say, the teachers and the capacity in the system. It is also important to make, and that's a different perspective that you and Sharma brought on board. And I think capacity of the system is lacking, and the organizational ability is one aspect of that capacity, and the lack of, human resources, the vacancies, etc., is another aspect of that situation. But in that context, do you think actually that the non-state or the private sector has actually the capacity to deal with the kinds of, the population that it is addressing? Many of them, like you said, to deal with low cost or budget private schools, which are taking people coming from, economically less privileged backgrounds, where parents may not themselves be able to offer any academic support at home, etc., etc. And actually, there are a lot of challenges of teaching the children who come from these backgrounds, and it requires actually quite, in a sense, I would say, better levels of training in terms of teachers and their competence, and a whole bunch of range of inputs, which perhaps in a low cost or a budget private school, if you don't have a really well-trained teacher who may understand the context from which the child is coming, appreciate the fact that he or she doesn't have support at home. I mean, do you think that the capacities in that sense are there within that sector to be actually able to deal with the quite complex, situation of these children?
I think once you get past the opposition between government and private, I don't know anybody who advocates or who has argued that we should close down government schools. Right? There is no such argument there to be made. Reason why CCS works with private schools, as I mentioned, is largely because that's where we see some maybe have an influence that we want to have. Right? So I think everyone believes that we should make sure that we design a system where both kinds of schools are able to flourish. Right? And we do what is required for each one of them. And regulation, of course, is one key part of that sort of puzzle. Right? In my view, I think what state needs to do is to provide funding. Money is the biggest inequality in a sense among the parents. Right? Second is to provide information so that parents can make informed choices. That could be among private schools or between private and government schools. So how does the state create that information for the parent to make those informed choices? And then third, I think function of the state would be to do quality assurance. Right? So what can we do to assure quality to the parents, to enforce contract in the sense of promises made by the school to the parents when they take admission to those schools. So I think those are the three broadly roles I see for the state. Now, I think they know much better about the capacity of the state in terms of what it can and cannot do. But if they cannot, we would have to build that capacity. I mean, there is just no other way of doing it. And whatever it takes to build that capacity has to be done. So I think the point that you made, I think very interesting point that you made about the different kinds of demographic of students who are coming into the education system, school now more so in higher education. And one way of, I think I've been intuitively thinking about this, that if you have unique child who is unique in many different ways, right? And you want some intervention being done, and at the end you want more equal outcome, where children, despite being unique when they start out, are somehow more equal in terms of what they gain and learn through the process of schooling. Right? And it's like, if that is the goal, then if you have a unique child, you do standardized inputs, which is what I said my biggest complaint is with the system today. There's so much standardization that has happened across in the infrastructure, input norms, qualification of teachers, salaries of teachers, right? If you standardize input of that kind, you are going to get unequal outcome. So only way to have a unique child get more equal outcome is to do unique input, which is what I think you were referring to, personalized, more individual focus, right? Attention given to each individual in the classroom, as opposed to doing mass production. I think that's where I see the capacity of the private schools to deliver better value. And I think, as you pointed out, learning time velocity of learning, right? One thing parents know that there is much more engaged in the classroom, whatever the quality of engagement may be in the private school. But the teacher is far more engaged in the classroom on average, right, as other norms. And I think I see the private school can perform that role. Many governments, including our next door neighbor Pakistan and Bangladesh, both of them have actually designed programs where they actively support private schools, but even low-fee private schools who are good, right? Giving teachers the training. We train government school teachers, so there is no training for the low-fee private school teachers. Right? Pakistan actually has a program to train those teachers. Right? They have an incentive system for the private schools. If you achieve certain benchmarks that we have set for you, you will get extra monthly stipend for your students that you have. So there are ways in which I think once we overlook the binary and the opposition, we can make the system work, which will deliver value for parents as they see the value.
Thank you. That was, I think we've had covered a lot of ground actually, many interesting perspectives every day. I think the whole idea of having this panel really was to try and see how both the state and the non-state can be, both more social accountable as well as, cater to really the larger goals that I think both sides actually are in some way or the other. So they might go some perspectives, but how some convergence can be achieved. And I think we have some interesting inputs on that. I'm going to open it to the public if there are questions. Yeah, just speak loudly.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Gurjot. I've been working in education for a couple of years now, and there was a lot of talk about how regulation is required, and I have a question on that particular point. So, as the point was well made, that in the private sector you have a very active issue of rent seeking. But in the public sector, from whatever my limited experience has told me, that everything boils down to the decision makers in the public schools, in the public education setup, which ends up being a bureaucrat at the end of the day. So how do we regulate decision making in the public school setup? Say, let's just take Sabha Shiksha, for example. Because from what I've seen, unfortunately, bureaucrats tend to be very susceptible to get, in a way, seduced by pretty looking PPPs. and which is where the point was made that there's just no regulation. When anyone comes in with whatever methodology, like this works, and they're like, okay, come on, let's start doing it. So how do we create a regulatory mechanism to prevent that from happening? Because that kind of then has a knock-on effect where the teacher has to do 25 hours of work in a 8-hour work day. So, any comments?
Before I put my question, I just want to point out two things. I am just wondering that in this group, how many of us have been school teachers? And how many of us have studied in government school system? Because these are the 2 points of contention. Okay. I happen to be both, and at present I teach in American University, Delhi. In relation to this, I have 3 pointed questions. One, I felt that we are missing the understanding of state. It seems that we know it, but we need to differentiate state with reference to level, historical trajectories, institutions, and also how what Kiran has been working on, how elite IAS officers and the front bureaucracy themselves imagine themselves as state. To imagine a homogeneous understanding of state by both private, non-private, I think that path will lie, would be a problematic. Second thing is that what has been the complicity of state itself in dismantling public education system in India? That's a question which has not been addressed. And my last question is about aspiration. We seem to assume that aspiration is something we all know about. And I wish to just read out 3 sentences from my PhD class. What are the ways in which aspiration practiced through English medium schools is changing education and public sphere? And what is the idea of citizenship and relationship with state and market that governs this aspiration? This was in one way alluded to by Professor Varghese. And second, how does aspiration as a situated cultural practice operate in distinct class caste contexts? How does मैं भी जाना चाहता हूँ अमेरिका, आप भी जाना चाहते हैं अमेरिका. So how does aspiration work for me in comparison to Islam?
Hi, my name is Prakhar. I work at the Central Square Foundation. My question is, I work in the public governance team. So in my head, these all the stakeholders in the district, including teachers and DOs, these are very rational actors. They don't have any incentive to perform better on ground. That is why they are not performing well on ground. So my question to you is very direct. How do you make the system and all these stakeholders more accountable while giving them more incentives to perform better? What could be the different models of it? Yeah, just thinking out loud here, because we continuously grapple with this dilemma on day-to-day basis. Thank you.
So, I mean, this will be more question about the government system than about this thing. So I'll just make some commentaries and others will also, I'm sure, reflect on it. One is, we talked about these swings in the system. You said someone comes with a new PPT and then it's good. So at the heart of it lies the fact that we don't really analyze issues and we don't really then develop a sort of strategy or a kind of worldview. Okay? That is because our research institutions, especially at the state level, I'm not talking about the national level so much, but at the state level, are really in very sorry conditions. Some of you go and see, they are sort of casually staffed, they are underfunded, and so we don't really, this is a big missing piece of picture in our education system, knowledge creation and analysis. So because we don't do it, we don't have a clear, sort of roadmap that this is where I want to go and this is what I'm trying to achieve. So anyone who comes is equal. It's very democratic, and that's how you swing all the time. Plus, as you know, we're a very hierarchical system. and highly centralized. So any one person at certain time can sort of make that switch. So these two factors I think combine to make it a very, very unstable system. I agree with you on the that you really have to understand the state much more. And in our country, for some reason, we have not done too much of it. I really agree with you. About your question on the complexity of the state system, definitely there was collusion. And if you look at it, I mean, this is what I'm saying from my experience, how it happened was that because, again, the lack of, the fact that you couldn't create very good schools and the fact that you didn't really have a very good analytical mechanism made you very vulnerable to whoever the powerful actors come, and in this case, many international agencies and lately the corporate sector became extremely powerful, and so you start swaying it. So the less your own analysis, the less your own sort of thought process, the more you get carried away by, especially people who are powerful. And in the post, I mean, today we are a different country, but during the 1995, mid-1990s, growth was, there was all kinds of financial crisis, there wasn't this kind of growth, and the confidence levels were very, very low. So, and plus there was this very strong push for, new public management, privatize, and so on and so forth. So that certainly the state can collusion. And how the state can be made accountable, that's, I think that Professor Verghese, because he's a professor, and he will be able to tell you.
I will take up one issue, that's how to make the schools function effectively or system better. We have instances, it's not always true that the private sector is efficient and effective, public sector is not so. You take nowadays, in the independent India, if you can one example where you can marry excellence with equity, while students, if you see that, there is a combination of, in other cases, there is an association or a correlation that is developing between household income levels, parental education, and the type of education that you get, the type of schools that you attend, and the type of education that you get. Well, it is not the cognitive dimensions of education, but education is becoming a social screening device to perpetuate and exaggerate and the intergenerational inequalities. The role of education dramatically changes when you are talking about this. But Navodaya Vidyalaya is an exception to this. Because if you see the initial intake in grade 4 or 5, you find that it is more equally spread to the rural areas. And once they come out after the grade 12, we have done some studies about the follow-up studies of what happens to Navodaya Vidyalayas. You find the number of IAS qualified persons from the Navodaya Vidyalayas. You find those people who qualified for the JEE, and you find the students, you find that there is an equality in terms of the outcome, and also there is a sense of equal distribution. That is a democratic principle, equally delivered to everything. That is what I was talking about, the educational institutions becoming the extension of democratic unity. That is the meaning of that. So it's not true that the government institutions are not functioning. There are many, if you take the IITs, they are also government institutions. If you take IIM, they are also public institutions. So you find that there are so many things. But what happens is that when the service is totally targeted to the poor and the lowest in society, the system becomes inefficient. That is what has happened in France. The public system in the 1950s, Dr. Rashmi Sethi mentioned right to me, and if you do an analysis of the share of IAS qualified people from the government schools, who are government school diagram in the 1950s and 60s, and if you do the same analysis in 2010 or 2012 or now, you find that there is a dramatic decline in the share of the public schools. So it is not because the public schools were not good. The public schools became ineffective and inefficient. And reason is that the well-to-dos migrated to the other schools, and that we are also responsible for making the public system inequal. That is where the question of aspiration is. The individual aspirations are very different from social commitment that is made by the state and society. And initially, there was a marriage, a cohesion, or an integration of what individuals try to promote and what the state tried to provide. And this gap was widened over a period of time. And with the entry of market, most people, well-to-do people, aligned with the market rather than with the state. And as a result of that, the state declined and the state got weakened, and state was a source of, one of the sources for criticism was the state. As a result of that, we also individually and collectively contribute to the weakening of the state. One hope that we get today is that today the world is, in many cases, the world is led by two forces. I'd say that if you look at the American presidential election, you find that all the three candidates who will be contesting final election, whether it is Donald Trump or Joe Biden or I forgot the name. All of them are 76, 77, 78. But the competition in the world, they come to the generation of, they belong to the generation of the 1950s and 60s. And they have a different attitude towards life because they have enjoyed the prosperity, a prosperity life. And they had the people who are responsible for introducing market mechanisms and the market changes. Today, if you see the globally, which is not recognized very well, the competition is to see that who is the youngest leader. If you say, for example, when Jacinda became the Prime Minister in New Zealand at the age of 38, and she had the first baby as the Prime Minister. Nowadays you find that, the first baby, first marriage or second marriage is taking place as the state of, leaders of the state. When Macron became the president at the age of 39, and you find that Marin Sana in Finland became the Prime Minister at the age of 34, and the 12 members are female out of 19, and the latest is that Kurz, C-U-R-T-Z, became the Prime Minister at the age of 33 in Austria. What is the difference? The difference is that this is a millennial generation, and this millennial generation has seen that the markets can create havoc, and it can be very harmful because they have seen the economic crisis of 2007. And what they try to do, two elements common in this is that one is they have a liberal thinking, and they want the state to play an important role, which is contrary to the role or the position that was taken by them. Or in other words, politically I feel that this gives a lot of hope for state to come back, state to be invited honorably and say that we want you. When you are there, we do not recognize your value. When you are not there, we recognize the value. When we have the eyes, we do not recognize the value of eyes. When we become blind, we realize the value of eyes. So it is the state, is that when the state disappeared and the economic crisis, we realized what state means. Now, they are the people who are the hope for politically and also socially, who will be bringing the state back, honorably back to this. And that is the sense of revival for a democratic sector, egalitarian principles, and going ahead with it.
I think just addressing the question of regulation that the first question that you raised, right? I think one of the things which is in the new education policy is about the separation of functions. So today, one single bureaucrat, the Secretary of Education in the department does everything. Right? He's a policy maker, he's a regulator, he's also a service provider, runs government schools, and also an adjudicator and quality assessor. Right? All of those roles are performed by one single department, one single person in charge. So one of the key idea of improving regulation and capacity is to break these functions up. Right? So you're a separate regulator, and we have done this in many other sectors, right? Separate quality assessor, right? And a policy maker. So there are ways in which we can split this role that needs to be done. And I think we talked about it, Kiran was there in the first roundtable we did on the separation of functions. And we found in doing research on that there were 17 different agencies independent agencies exist in UK that deal with education. 2 of which don't even report to the Ministry of Education. They report directly to the Parliament. Right? So that is the level of separation and independence they have built in the system. So the idea that we have at the high level, 3 parties of government and separation of powers, right, needs to be applied further down the chain, right? And that I think we have not yet done as effectively as it should be done in education particularly. I think that's one way to think about what needs to be done to improve the capacity and quality of regulation. Yeah. Yeah, anyway, it does talk about this separation of functions. Let's see what happens.
I just wanted to make a few points. I think, one of the challenges of this whole debate is in the monetization conversation. The parent, right to choose is, we're all very satisfied. And parents will try to find every advantage possible. There's a clear case where competition is, furious for, every job out there, every seat out there. And I think there was kind of an interesting case, starting in Chile, where there was very good data, a lot of good data to make informed choices. And what you find is that the parents select not on quality or learning outcomes; they select based on your peer group. They know what they're doing. You find it either through formal mechanisms or informal mechanisms. You figure out what you want to do with your parental choice, with your information that's available to you. And I think it's very true that over time, at least in many societies, my grandfather was one of the first children in Nepal, commoner children to get an education in Nepal, in a public school. My father went to public schools that came after that. In my generation, no one went to public school. It's sort of a situation of, and it's a reality in India, I'm sure, it's about stratification that has led to stigma. So I think this question of, it's become so complicated. It's not just about whether, a principal with, I've met with tremendous principals in public schools. It's not about, and they can transform their school. They can transform the lives of the children they have access to, from early childhood all the way up. And that's the thing, right? It's a mixed bag. I mean, it's not just public school principals, it's also private school principals. They're all, you have good ones and bad ones. People have tried. But I think at a system level, we are conversing here on what the system is doing. And it is about whether it be the regulation, whether it be, whether it be the policy facilitation, it's really about what are we intending to facilitate here. Are we facilitating more stratification? Is that something that is, a big concern to us, and to be, and it should be to all of us. But I think I really think about this bigger issue of the tolerance for inequality, that we just have it so inbuilt. I was just in South Africa, where we think of it as a very pure form of racially classified inequality. But we have lived in class systems. It's not so different, the things that we've experienced in our lives. So I think it is that question of how happy are we with the idea of consumer demand, driving all of education. It's linking back to the first question you had asked me. And I think the second thing I wanted to say was, there are things, of course, to learn from the private sector, but it is about, I think, what is learned, often. Someone I know, Sam Abrams, wrote a very interesting book called The Education and the Commercial Mindset, where he talks about how in Finland, what is happening is that the business principles are actually innovating the public education system, because it is a system that has not allowed any of the more, radical reforms for teachers, it has not allowed for many, many reforms that you hear in many countries, in the US, in Nepal, in Latin America. So it's a very interesting written chapter on what he considers the interesting thing about Finland. But it links to that point about earlier Wade, about how governments, if they are strong, then they can take interesting ideas from private. If you have a strong government, you can regulate better. If you have a strong government, you can learn from other ideas better. There is a diversification of innovation. There's a diversification of ideas. It is up to, I feel like I've met many, many people who are actually saying, in the private sector space, who are saying they're evolving so that they become, because they recognize the importance of scale at government, So their role needs to evolve so that they do, whatever they can to improve the government system. That can be debated whether the purpose is nefarious. It depends on where you are on the ideological spectrum, how you even think about that. But I feel, the relationship can only be improved if people are talking such a space also. I just wanted to comment on this incentives point that someone raised, because I think the more I thought about this, I've made the transition from the IMF to UNESCO, so I've seen all of the shades of thinking that to some degree, because I spent some time thinking about teachers, it's about respect. Teachers are teachers in the business because of the pay, not all of them, right? I mean, really, it is about or me, let's say, am I incentivized by performance pay? Probably not. My working conditions incentivize me, and I think as long as unless we really can radically think like this, that those people are also people doing their job, I don't know if we're really going to advance, on these conversations of how do we reform government. I mean, we're all people trying to do our jobs, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
That's an important point, and I was going to come to it myself. I think we have to rethink what we mean by incentives, and what are the incentives that actually really matter, particularly in these areas. As she said, I mean, education, the payoffs are, one would imagine that they are much more than just the pay packet as you said at the end of the day. And incentivizing just in that context, I think I'm very limited that we need to restructure that conversation. Of course, you need to motivate the different actors, and there is a place for motivation. But is it only performance pay, as she said, you need facilitation, you need to create that environment, you need supportive environment. And I think in that context, also the larger debate or conversation on accountability needs to be visited, where we have taken a very sort of punitive approach towards accountability. Performance pay is one aspect of that punitive approach. But actually, to improve performance, we probably need to take a more positive sort of approach towards what are the enabling or the sustaining conditions that you're providing before you start subtracting your people. This has been a fascinating discussion. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think, and I hope the rest of you have as well. Thank you very much to our panelists for their